So my history of being abusive, my first interaction with abuse is when I was a child, and I remember the abuse that was happening in my home. And ironically enough, it was at the hands of my mother, my mom to my stepdad. And so I remember those days very vividly, and there were a lot of incidents, but there was never any intervention or anyone saying anything about it. It just happened, and then we would just move on. So that's the foundation of it. And then once I became an adult, that's when it first started to express itself. That's when the abuse first came out. There was no other signs of it for me. Like, I wasn't a horrible student in school. I didn't get in fights in school. I wasn't an angry kid. So it wasn't something that you could see unless you really dove into my life. And so when I was 19 years old, that's when it really first started to come out in my first relationship. I thought the behavior was normal because as a child, it was normalized. And so I thought everybody behaved that way. And so I just continued. And then I partnered with a person who was just as dysfunctional as I was. And so we just kept that dance going. That was the first relationship. And then the second relationship, it was within my marriage. It was a very similar dynamic, except she didn't come with that same history. But throughout the time, our time together, she just adapted to it and protected it and did the things that a typical victim would do. So there was me, I used all the tactics, the manipulation, the honeymoon period, all of those things. So I did all those things to keep my family because I did want my family, but I just did not know how to love them or did not know how to lead them or be a productive part of that unit. But I knew I wanted to be there. I just didn't know how to be there. So that abusive cycle, for me, it went on for quite a few years, and it did get frustrating because, at a certain point, I realized that, okay, I'm the issue here. I'm the problem. And I always say I did the math. I said, okay, I had domestic violence in my home when I was a kid, domestic violence in my first relationship, domestic violence in my second relationship, and the common denominator of that is Dominique. And so that was a very eye-opening time for me when I recognized that, and I recognized that I was a problem, but I did not know how to stop myself or how to fix myself because it was such an instinctive behavior. It wasn't, this well thought out, hey, I'm going to go home and do this. No, it was an argument happened, something happened, and I was triggered. And then in that trigger, my boundaries were very, very wide. They're very loose. A lot of things could happen within that trigger. I couldn't keep up with it. It was too much. And, and then I developed this strong desire I don't want to be that person anymore. And I remember when episodes would happen, and I truly felt like I don't want to be this anymore, but I don't want to tell anybody, because if I tell anybody, tell people, they're going to know about this. And then, the consequences that are going to come from this, I stand to lose a lot of things if this gets out. So the shame, the humiliation, the guilt that I felt, that kept me from moving forward, even though I wanted to, but I couldn't. So I stayed in that, area for a long time. The jealousy, the rage, the control, all of those were rooted in fear and insecurity for me. People looked at me and they didn't understand how I was insecure. It was like, oh, you don't seem like an insecure person. But I was very insecure in my relationship, very insecure in who I was as a man, as a person. But I could not show that. I could not show that. I could not speak about what I truly was feeling. And so there was a lot of behaviors I remember just being afraid of anything new. Anything new that came my way, I automatically shut down and said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not going. I'm not meeting these people. I'm not talking to these. I don't know who they are. And I was afraid of everything. And I remember, my ex-wife was saying that, she would bring new concepts and new ideas and I was not having it. And it was all rooted in fear. And I would protect my fear fiercely. Like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing this. And it would be simple things, having new friends or, taking a trip somewhere, and I was always skeptical of everything. So there was a lack of trust, just in general. It was a very constricted time for me. Like I didn't have the flexibility that I have now to speak or to talk or to meet people or to be who I am. The real change for me happened when my ex-wife, she left. She took the boys and she left. She moved out. And I remember being in our 3,500 square foot home, built from the ground up, 6 bedrooms, all the upgrades, we had the best house on the block. I remember being there in that big house by myself. And then that's when I did that math, that equation. And I did that math. And I looked at myself and I realized something was wrong with me. In domestic violence, they say that, and it's true that, one of the most dangerous time is when the victim leaves. And for me, it wasn't, I was always thinking to myself, well, I'm shocked you stayed this long, because I knew, hey, I'm nothing, I'm shocked that you're still here. So when she left, I was upset, but I didn't, I never thought about, okay, this is the end, well, she has to die or things like that. I literally was like, man, I'm really surprised. But being in that house and by myself, doing the math, thinking about who I was and who I wanted to be, that time alone by myself really helped me because I didn't have anyone else to look at or blame. And my desire to change during that time and be different superseded denial. It superseded, staying, the idea of even staying the same, because I just really looked at that and I just said, wow, my life is collapsing right around me. And I mean, I could just blame everybody else, but no, there's concepts that I picked up throughout life that helped me in those moments. One concept is locus of control. When I was taking motivational psychology when I was in college, and the locus of control piece never left me. It was just, my life had crumbled. What do I attribute that to? Is it external events or is it internal? Was it me? And so for me, I had an internal locus of control, and I looked at myself. I said, well, this happened because of me, as opposed to saying, well, this happened because everyone else, it's all their fault. It was me. I was the person that was the primary reason that this was falling apart. And I looked at that. I didn't know it would pop up in my life later, but I remember thinking this is a really interesting concept, and because at the time when I learned it, I was extremely biased to the external at that point, so if I'm late or if I'm something, I'm blaming everything else. I'm coming up with these sad stories and excuses so people could excuse me. And so that concept was something that came to me during the time that I was in the house. I was also a college athlete, so I played football, and every day after football practice, we would watch film. And so watching film was something that was very eye-opening to me too. You couldn't escape yourself. And I wish everyone could have an experience where they could see themselves, because we'd be in film and your coach would ask us, hey, did you do your job on this play? And all of us, yeah, I did my job. And he'd get to the, big screen on the TV, everybody's watching, he's rewinding 22 times where you made a mistake. And then in the beginning, you would try to defend yourself. You become defensive about it. But then after you became more seasoned and you became a little more mature, you just accepted where he's like, you know what? Yeah, I missed that block. I'll get it next time, coach. And so that was another concept. These two concepts were things that were in me that were just there. And then they sort of spawned when I was there by myself. And it was like, okay, this is internal locus of control. This is my fault, and then I started playing back, the scenarios like, that's me. Like I didn't have to do that. Like, I didn't have to hit her. I didn't have to throw things. I didn't have to yell at her or curse everybody. I didn't have to do that, but I didn't know how not to. So being in that home, that was the biggest wake up call for me. The other thing about that was that when I was in that home and that desire hit me to change, it wasn't really about them. I didn't change for my son, or I didn't change for my wife. So I had thought, well, I don't know what's going to happen here, So then I did some algebra. And I said, okay, well, X plus Y equals Z. And I said, well, if I ever get into another relationship, I'm probably going to have the same result if I don't change. So that was the algebra that I did. And so when I did that math, and then I said, okay, I don't want to be in another relationship. I just need to focus on my healing and figure out what's wrong with me. Now, my background is social services, social work. So I had been in that arena for years. And so I know, okay, when people have issues, hey, you got to go to counseling, you got to go to therapy, you got to go to group. So I had known what to do, but I just was too afraid to do it. And at that point, I had nothing to lose. And so I just said, okay, all right, I'm just going to start going to therapy and figure this out. I'm going to figure out what's wrong with me. And without knowing what the future held, or I had no idea what was going to happen. I just said, okay, I just need to go heal. I don't know. I don't really care. I just need to go heal so I'm never that man again. Healing is, to me, it's digging through your trauma and your pain, your issues. And for me, there was so many of those things from my childhood, experiencing just poverty, drugs, violence, the instability, and not having a sense of being stable. As a kid, I had to go back and look at those things and look at how I was raised, how, what happened to me, and I look at, and through therapy, I looked at a lot of these things, and I look at my mom, I look at my dad, and, not casting dispersions on them. They were broken as well. And so I'm not upset at them. I understand though. I understand how these things happen. But the healing, part, for me is literally sitting in your trauma, sitting in your pain, examining why that is there, how it's affecting you, what it's doing to you, and what it's doing to the people around you. And that's a very difficult thing to do, because you're literally, most of our lives, we spend a lot of time putting that pain away. And we spend an immense amount of effort to put it away, put it in a little black box and tuck it away. And so to go and grab that box, open it up, and start digging through painful things that make you want to cry, when you look at those things, everything that's in that box is painful. And you may have 85 items in that box. And so for me, the healing was grabbing that box, looking through it, and I went through it with a vengeance. I just said, okay, look, I got to change. But it was painful, and it was hurtful to look at the trauma and then to make the connection between my traumas and who I've become. And that was a very hard process, but it was a necessary process. And it is important to pull the root out, because before, when I had tried to stop my abusive behavior, I sort of just cut a couple branches off. But I didn't, the whole stump is still there. The roots are still planted everywhere. And so the healing part is where you pull that whole root up. It comes from places that you don't even know. Like, well, I thought it was right here, but the root is 22 feet, in this direction, or 30 feet in that direction. And so the painstaking work of pulling it up and then finding out it's not just right here. Oh, it's over there. And now I have to go over there and I have to figure out what that was. And that's what healing was for me. Stage 2 was I had to exit the situation, because I couldn't heal in this situation. I had toxic behaviors. My wife had, she had her own toxic behaviors. We had this mixture, but, we would always say we loved each other. We're supposed to stay together. We're supposed to do all of the things that we're supposed to do, but I couldn't heal in that environment. So for me, stage 2 was stepping away and then completely focusing on me. I resigned from my job and took out my 401k, moved from Los Angeles back to San Diego. Didn't know where I was going to stay, didn't know what I was going to do. We let our house go. It was just, I didn't want anything. And people were telling me like, dude, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you doing this? Like, dude, that's stupid. That's not a smart decision. And I couldn't explain it to anybody. I just had to go. And I remember a young lady saying to me, she says, Dominique, it sounds like you're running away from something. And instinctively I said to her, I said, no, I think I'm running to something. I didn't even know where that came from. I was like, I'm not running from, I'm running to. Getting out of the scene, out of the toxic scene, to where, okay, I could breathe normal air now. Now I can figure out what's going on. And so once I was able to leave the circumstance, came home, and I was able to take a year off of work, I started going to therapy. And then going to therapy and to try to figure out what's the deal here, like what's going on. And from therapy, that led me to like 4 or 5 different other groups. And they say, hey, have you tried this group? No. Well, where is it? When? How much? I went to that one. And from that one, they say, hey, there's another group across town this way. I went to that one. And I just needed to know where and when. And I was going. And I was not the type that where you had to ask me to talk. I was the one that where it said, okay, hey, Dom, we need some other people to talk now. Because I was sick of me. I don't have a blueprint. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew I had to go. And it wasn't go find somebody else, because I remember I had done the algebra, I had done the math. If I get somebody else, I'm going to be in the same circumstance and I'm going to harm another person. And I don't want to harm anybody else, and I don't want to harm myself, and I don't want to be harmed either. So okay, time out from all of this. So yeah, that phase was very important. I don't believe that I could have healed the way that I did had I stayed in that circumstance, because the dynamics were too entrenched. And there was so much venom and negativity and toxicity between us. And it was just, there's physical abuse, emotional abuse, there's mental, verbal, you name it, it's all there. And I did not know how to be a human being in that relationship. I didn't know how to. I was an animal in that relationship. And I didn't know how to be a man there. So that part of just isolation and then just working on me and not having to worry about work, that was really a blessing. I spent a lot of days just figuring out what am I doing? What do I want to do? I would go down to the beach and sit there and just by myself and just figure out, what do I like? What am I like? Who am I? Who was I before this? How did I get here? And so I'm doing a lot of introspection on my own. So by the time I get to therapy, it's the stuff they're talking about. I already processed a lot of it, because I'm already thinking about this stuff like, hey, this. And so I learned a lot of things in therapy about myself. But there's a lot of things that I learned just really, really studying myself during that time period. I had gone to a batterers program before, and so that's when I was in Los Angeles. For me, it didn't pull the root, and maybe for other people it did, but for some people, other people I've talked to, it doesn't pull the root either. It's behavior modification, and that whole process means well, but it doesn't look at who men are and how we operate. So you put me in a room with a bunch of other guys, how deep do you think I'm going to go? I'm not going all the way. I may go 3 or 4 feet, maybe even 5 or 6. But my level of trauma goes down to 22 feet. I'm not doing that in front of these people, and I'm not telling them what happened to me. I'm not talking about that stuff. So for me, that's why the individual counseling was so helpful, because I was able to go one-on-one, and then I could go to the 22 feet and I go there with my therapist, and I felt comfortable with that because the other people in the group, there were some, good guys, but I don't know them, and, I didn't feel comfortable talking with them, and I know a lot of guys didn't. And so the 52 week was definitely, it does help. It teaches you some basic principles. But I think that for a lot of offenders, there needs to be more work. There needs to be deeper work. 52 weeks is not enough. And I say it should be half of that time, 26 weeks should be individual, the other one should be group. Because I believe the group dynamic is still important, but you should have the concept of being able to just get your stuff out one-on-one with someone without in a safe environment. That's the other thing. In the 52-week group, that's not exactly a safe environment. It's not a safe environment for me to expose and say, the real things that happen in my life. And in order to really make a dent in this arena and change this, for me, I believe wholeheartedly that has to happen. There has to be a shift in that area. After going to therapy for a few years, and during that time, I'm learning as I'm going. And my ex-wife are going back and forth. We're in divorce. We're separated. We're divorced. We tried to get back together. There was still. So I'm trying to implement the new materials and new things that I'm learning. Sometimes I fell flat on my face. Other times I was the victory. It was, yes, I survived that one whatever incident and I didn't go crazy and so there was a lot of up and downs. Throughout that time, the third stage, I developed my becoming a timeout specialist. And again, it wasn't a perfect process by any stretch of the word. I remember talking with my ex-wife and there were times where I would send her these horrible text messages. The violence would stop, but then I'm still sending these horrible text messages. And I'm remembering, this is long text messages that, just cursing and just being belligerent. And then there was a time where I realized, wait, I have to stop that. That's not good either. And then it got to the point where I would type the text messages and I would stop and read them like, no, I can't send that. And I would erase it. And then it got to the point where less and less, and then there was no more of those. So the third stage was walking this out, the new knowledge and the new insight that I had. It was walking it out. And it was walking it out during a very difficult time as we were going through a divorce. And so that was a very hard time to do that, because it wasn't divorce is not a pretty, place. And there were a lot of scenarios where I was triggered back to the old Dominique, and it was like, but no, we don't operate that way anymore. We don't do that anymore. It was a very confusing stage. The third stage was confusing because it was just, again, walking the newness of this out. And what I learned is that life doesn't stop because you have this new insight. People are still going to be people. Your triggers are still going to be there. People are still going to cut you off in traffic. Boss still going to be a jerk. Life still happens. And, for me, I thought that, the seas would part, for me. It was like, hey, he learned some new knowledge. Let him through. No, it didn't happen that way. And so I had to learn to self-manage through that time and to say, okay, wait a minute. This is where I developed my personal protocol. Just like we all have policy at our jobs, and you stay within policy, you're okay. You used to tell us that when I was a social worker. You outside of policy, there's nothing we can't do for you. Can't help you. And so for me, I started personal policy. There are things that I'm no longer going to do. I'm no longer going to get into hour-long arguments with my ex-wife, demean her and call her names, and I remember thinking to myself where I said, I hope to get to a place where this is not the norm. Every now and then I may slip up and say something, stupid or something, but we would be able to look at that and say, well, hey, that's not like you. That was something that I wanted to get to during that third phase. And like I said, it was up and down, but I stuck with it. I wasn't going backwards. And when I made a mistake, I would apologize for my mistake. I would say, you know what, I'm sorry. I that's all me. That was me. Let me step back. Let me figure that out. So that became more of the norm during that time. And again, it was tricky. And I also had something in me during that third stage, another motivation. That's when it really hit me about my sons, and I wanted them to see something different. I talked to them one-on-one, and then all this in a group, and then let them know, hey, your dad was wrong. Your dad's going to change, and you're going to see that. And so that was a talk that I had with them, and then I went about the process of showing them that and showing them, okay, we have to do different. Like, we have to do different. That was a huge motivation for me during that third stage. It was a huge motivation I was happy with the newness that I had. I was very happy with that. But it wasn't all set in concrete yet. Some of it was still, you could still move a little bit of it. And so I wanted it to be in concrete. So I just knew to keep doing what I was doing. If I want to change, I got to do this work. That's what it was. And there's no easy way to do it. There's no magic pill. There's none of that. It's just, I got to do this work. I have to. And I would not give up. I remember laying in my bed, big California king size bed by myself, and I'm just crying and I'm just broken. And I remember at that time, this was a spiritual component of this to me. And I felt like God said to me, I can't use you if you keep doing this. And so for me, I remember that, and it was something that was so powerful to me, because I was thinking like, wait, I didn't know what it was. Use me for what? I'm just like, but the fact you want to use me, like, what do you mean? And at that moment, that's when I stopped the behavior cold turkey. No more violence. At that moment, no more violence. And I said, no more violence. And then, there were some incidents that happened after that tested that where I would, back in the day, I would go off. And I said, nope. I decided it was a choice. And I decided that there would be no more of that. And the thing about deciding is that when you decide, anytime homicide, fratricide, suicide, any of those sides, something has to die. So when I decided, the option to be violent was no longer there. It died. It was gone. And that was the moment. I didn't know the dynamics of how to do this or what, of all of that. I just knew I had to stop the behavior. It was almost like, I'm not a surgeon, but I know if someone's bleeding, stop the bleeding first. That's kind of what it was. And so that choice, that moment was like I said, it was a spiritual moment for me. And I didn't want to be who I was. And when that moment hit me, and it was like, I can't use you. And I didn't know what that meant, but it was a very powerful thing. And like I said, cold turkey stopped the violent behavior. I didn't know I could do that, but I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea why. I just knew, okay, all right, well, I'm stopping now. And after that, I found out some really horrific things in my marriage, and I didn't go there. In our marriage, there was infidelity on my side and my ex-wife's side. And so during that time, I found out about her stuff. And so she thought she was gonna die after that. Because I would go off for lesser things. And I remember finding out, and I just said, well, that is what it is. Like, I'm still not doing that. My decision covered that subject. My decision covered everything. It covered everything. It didn't matter the circumstance. I had played things out in my head. It doesn't matter what you do. You can take my kids, my money, you can take my car, you can sleep with my friends. I don't care. I'm never going to lose myself again. And I was dead serious about that. That's not going to happen. So the scenario doesn't matter. Because when I lose myself, I'm not a good person. When I am authentically who I am at my greatest. But when I lose myself to a situation or a person, or losing myself is symbolic of me having to be something that someone else wants me to be in order to please them. And then I'm not who I am. And so, throughout that time, I was so lost. I was lost before I got into the marriage, and then throughout the marriage, I lost myself even further. I was on a journey to discover who Dominique was. and nothing else mattered. I didn't care about those other things, and I wasn't going to lose myself further because someone else had a behavior or someone else did something. And I took the internal locus of control concept seriously. Like, okay, if I want my life to be better, then I have to change it. Doesn't matter what anyone else does. That's what pushed me to go in that direction. But yeah, it was definitely a process of looking at everything around me and then saying, okay, I can't keep blaming outside events for my behavior. Oh, I lost it because she did this or said that or this or that. Come on, like, stop. Like, I couldn't do it. Their denial wasn't working, and none of the defense mechanisms were working. It wasn't working. You know, it was just, I had a desire to be different. I wanted to change. When I first started the process, and I had gone to the 52-week class, I went as a hostage. So I didn't have the desire at that time. No one made it relevant to me. It wasn't relevant. No, they just said, go to these classes. Well, yeah, whatever, fine. If that's what you want me to do, I'll do it. But it wasn't relevant. And relevance to me is a huge deal. I worked in dropout prevention for the school districts. So I have a junior in high school who has 8 credits. And so I have to figure out how to help this kid get from this point to point B. One example was a young man, just 8 credits. And I had to figure out what was going on. And so I started working with him, and then, you know, through some months, found out he wanted to go to the Navy. It's like, oh, you like the Navy. Got the brochure, sat down with him, went through the requirements, like, oh, wow, well, look at that. You have to have a high school diploma. All of a sudden, school became relevant. He shot through the roof after that. You know, he wasn't a straight A student, but he passed all of his classes, and he actually got to the Navy. So to me, that was something that, you know, something lit up in me when I saw that. And I was like, okay, if we don't make these things relevant, then people are not apt to take advantage of it. And so when I work with offender groups now, that's one of my first things I'm doing when I go into the groups, is I need to make this relevant to you. And I ask them what's important to them, what do they want, and I make it relevant. Your daughter, okay, your job, okay, we're gonna make it relevant. That's why this is important. And so for me, that's something to me that is just is huge. After stage 3 of walking it out and learning it, stage 4 was it solidifying. And it was it solidifying in that, you know, again, life is still happening, but my responses are nowhere near the same. And I'm getting my balance in this now. Now I can stand up straight. Now I can actually hold my own. You know, there were still areas in my life where I wasn't completely solid, but overall, my overall GPA was really good in that area. And so that was a very exciting time for me, because I realized I could be a different person. I could be a new person. I don't have to be that same old guy. And at that time, you know, my ex-wife knew, she recognized who I was. My kids at different times said to me, hey, Pop, you're different. You know, you're smiling more, you're laughing more, you know, and it's because I had dealt with the trauma, the pain, and I had to deal with the guilt of both sides of it. And I like what I call full circle healing for me. And half of that circle, I had to deal with the guilt of what I did to other people. And that was a very hard thing for me to do. But I did that. And then I had to go to the other side of the circle and deal about what people had done to me. So I had to heal from all of those things. And once I was able to do that, that gave me a sense of gratitude. I looked at life differently. I was very thankful for life. There was a different humility about me. And it was exciting. It was fun. I just felt new. And I felt new, and I just couldn't believe that I did that. But then the more I felt, the more further I wanted to go. You know, the more progress I made, the better I wanted to be. And it wouldn't stop. It just wouldn't stop. I would find more ways to be more creative and figure out other ways to do things. And it was really, really helpful. At that time, it was a 15-year-old at the time. He came to live with me. And then he was really having some difficulties with his mom, so he came to live with me. And so I would be tested with that as a parent. And so throughout those couple years that he lived with me, we developed a really, really good relationship. And he talks about how we got really close during that time. And I remember parenting him from a different way that I parented before. Before it was just right off the handle, you're gonna do what I say, blah, blah, blah. Now it's more thought out, more strategic. If he's not doing, I don't yell at him. We don't argue. It was a relationship based on respect. I'm your dad. You respect me. I'm going to respect you too. I'll apologize to him when I'm wrong. And so that was a really good time for us. And that was made possible by the healing. And he got to see a different dad. So he saw that other guy in the beginning, and then he saw this guy. Yeah, stage 4 was definitely an exciting time for me, and it was the newness of it. It's almost like when you learn how to do something and then you start to become proficient at it. I started becoming proficient at this, and I said, oh, okay, I'm feeling good now. I'm feeling really good. And I'm not done. I'm not, like I said, there's still areas where I had some fear, but I was confident that even in my areas of fear that, I've overcome and came this stuff. You next. Like nothing. Next, you're going too. Like whatever's coming up, you're next. Look at what I've been able to accomplish and conquer. So if I've been able to do that, there's no reason that anything is going to just sit there in my life and not be addressed. This stage is paying it forward. In all areas of my life, I am paying this forward. I am doing groups. I'm a trainer at my job in domestic violence. I do domestic violence trainings daily, and some of them I'm sharing my story, others I'm not, but I'm still started my own business with this, and I'm speaking at just various places. Like I said earlier, I'm going to Nova Scotia to speak there. Keynote speaker for an event coming up in Sacramento, and a bunch of smaller venue events. And so I'm very energized to pass this knowledge on. What helped me change and what we need to do systematically. If instead of just throwing 52 weeks out there, there's more, and I want that. Like I'm at the stage now where I'm thinking ahead. Hey, I want a class in middle school where we address these things. We address relationship dynamics. We address male-female dynamics, mutual respect. How to be better human beings to each other. Middle school level, high school level, and the college level as well. And these are mandatory classes. These are not 2-hour trainings. It's nothing against ceramics, but you know what? This is something that we all could use as a requirement. And so for me, I feel like before I leave this planet, I want that implemented. And so these are things that I'm thinking about. I've had conversations with the district attorney in San Diego about starting an offender engagement program where when say an offender, if there's a restraining order put on someone, you're assigned someone to help you learn and walk through that. Because what happens is someone gets a restraining order put on them, and then they're just left to their own devices. Clearly that person does not have the mental or emotional ability to handle that. So we should probably put someone with them to help them, meet with them weekly or something like that, to help them walk through that process, which in the end makes victims more safe. Because if there's someone there helping that person to heal, not only be accountable, but heal, if they heal, then they're not going after the victim. The victim is safer, but we've just been kind of leaving them out on their own. So this is definitely the pay it forward stage for me. I have no fear of telling my story, of saying who I am at this point. There was some fear and shame early when I first started, but I'm over that. It's the purpose of this is bigger than me being scared. And I've done so many events, and the response that I've gotten from people when they see me be vulnerable, it gives them permission to be vulnerable. I spoke to the Marines, and there was like 6,500 Marines at this event that I was speaking at, and I'll never forget the faces of those that came up to me after and said, "Hey, I think I'm abusing my son," or I think I may be an offender," or I'm one guy, "Hey, I'm a sex addict," or some young girl says, "Hey, I love to mentally and emotionally break down men. What do I like?" They were just coming from everywhere. It was like, well, "Okay, let's get you signed up. Let's get you signed up for these classes and this and that." But that's the phase where I am now. I have an immense sense of gratitude for this phase and love, and just my healing was so powerful to me that I have to give it away. Like, I can't just heal and go about my daily life after that. Like, I have to tell people about this and like, hey, look, you can have this freedom too. You can change your life. You don't have to live in slavery to whatever blah, blah, blah issue that you're dealing with. So it's something that energizes me. I have energy for this all day, every day. I talk this till I'm blue in the face. I would just say that if you are an offender or if you are a victim, you can change your circumstance. You can change. You don't have to live that way. There's nothing set in stone with this, and that it will take work. But I encourage anyone that is struggling, and it doesn't have to just be domestic violence. It could be anything, whatever you're struggling with. When you decide that that's it, then I believe that's it. And then you start the process of trying to figure out how you got there. But yeah, I just want to encourage people to look at themselves and do a self-assessment on themselves and figure out what is in their lives that they don't like, and then go about the business of changing that, because it's possible. I'm living proof of that.